Some good news when it comes to Chrono Odyssey. We have our first developer note that has been published on Steam, and it talks about the game, how a recent test went, and kind of gives us a hint that the game might be coming sooner than most people think. So what we'll do is we'll talk about this post, we'll look at the infographic because there's something very important on there, and then we'll talk about the future of Chrono Odyssey. I don't like being so dramatic. Let's go. So first they thank people who are waiting for the game and they want to give you an update, and then they publish this infographic, which we're going to come back to because it's probably the most important thing on here. But let's explain what this post is about. They say back in February, they held a private focus group test, which is effectively the same phrasing that they used last year. This one was actually May 10th last year, and they did a 14-day focus game test. One of those guys looks really familiar, by the way. So they've obviously done another FGT test, and they say many players participated, and thanks to the amazing feedback and in-depth data, we've been able to further move forward with the direction of the game. Now that in itself doesn't say that the test went amazingly well and like that, you know, they were super happy with absolutely everything. Obviously they say amazing feedback, but I kind of get the vibe that they're happy with how the test went. They do say though that since then we've been focusing on refining areas that needed improvement. Obviously things need improvement, otherwise the game would already be released. And then they say pushing the overall polish to the next level. That's obviously the goal. Then they actually talk about some of the content, but before we talk about some of the content of the test, I want to quickly jump to the end bit because it says coming soon. Even at this very moment, our team is working to build and fine-tune every part of the game to bring you the best possible experience. And very soon, we believe the time will come when we finally present Chrono Odyssey, which again gives me the vibe that they were kind of happy with the way that the test has gone. No news on what's next. In theory, we think that the closed beta test would be next. In practice, we have no idea. For the content, there's some interesting bits here. So apparently the most popular area was this place called Samora Stronghold, which looks like that, which technically is a new area of the map. I don't think we've seen that. Maybe it's on some of the trailers somewhere, but you know, pretty cool. They give a little bit of a lore dump, but you know, I don't care about lore. But then they give us something really interesting. Among all the content in the test, bounty hunting came out as the most popular. Tracking and taking down powerful targets requires not just skill, but a little bit of observation and patience. That just sounds cool, right? And they actually show off one of the wanted guys who looks a little bit like an ogre. And this was apparently somebody called the Ravenous Bog, or maybe that's where it was. He was a hulking brute that may appear clumsy, but don't let that fool you. Where do you run into him? Well, I mean, it may be a bog, it might not be a bog, who knows? But yeah, I mean, we're going to get some kind of bounty hunting. Now, I would hazard a guess that this is PvE bounty hunting, considering they're talking about a PvE enemy here. I wouldn't assume that this is PvP bounty hunting, so let's you know, dial that back. This game is apparently going to be mostly PvE focused, so if you're thinking this is PvP bounty hunting, you might be a little bit, you know, ambitious there. I don't think that's what this is talking about. Either way, sounds like a really cool system. Sounds like an extra bit of content. That sounds good. No harms, no questions there. Let's jump into this infographic though. Speaking about content, they actually have one here that says the most popular content during the test. And they have bounty hunting, which was apparently, I'm guessing that, you know, 82.2% of players actually did the bounty hunting, which is pretty cool. Sounds like a system that you're going to be engaging with quite often. A field boss, which I'm assuming is, when they say field, that's often means like the open field. So a world boss of some kind. Apparently 81% of people did that. And then the next three, if I'm honest, we don't really know what they are. One of them is called a labyrinth. One is a trial dungeon. Now, a trial dungeon, I would assume, is the normal kind of dungeon. Maybe 3 to 6 players. We're not 100% sure how many people are going to be in a team. And then a time portal, which obviously is something to do with the chrono mechanism, you would assume. But we don't really know what those are. Either way, they all sound like PvE. Let's just put that out there. And, you know, all I can think of in my head is that it's already more content than New World. But, you know, it's not slag off New World. Let's keep slagging off New World. No, but yeah, it sounds interesting. Sounds good. They also show off the 3 most defeated enemies. Apparently 50,000 of these were eradicated. One of them is a Flayer, a Broken, which is just your normal skeleton, and then a Deprived, which kind of, you know, very cool looking creatures, I think, here. Binami wants to put this in like Warhammer Fantasy terms. You have like a ghoul and then a skeleton, and then probably a demon kind of creature. But yeah, that looks cool. And then there's 2 interesting parts here, and we'll start with one that kind of actually confuses me a little bit, because they talk about the top 3 most weapons used. Now, this game has classes, right? There's going to be 6 classes. Let's see if I can remember them. In alphabetical order: Assassin, Berserker, Ranger, Paladin, Sorcerer, Swordsman. I think that's right. It'd be embarrassing if I'm wrong. But then there's obviously a choice of weapons of some sort, because otherwise they would just say class here, right? Now, how do the classes interact with the weapons? Well, that actually right now is a big mystery. We don't know. Is it a free choice of weapons? Is there a limited selection of weapons? Like in World of Warcraft, for example, certain classes could have certain weapons, but like the warrior could have pretty much all of them, but the priest couldn't. You know, like, we don't know. But we have the bow, the sword and shield, and the crossbow. Kind of sounds like people like the range damage, and then a tank, maybe. A big tanky boy, and some shooty. But yeah, the thing that confuses me the most is just how do the weapons interact with the classes? How is that actually going to function? Yeah, well, the jury's out on that one. When we obviously get the full closed beta test, hopefully we can actually talk about that, if they actually make that publicly available. I think, like, it's weird because a closed beta test in theory doesn't mean you can't speak about it publicly. That means if it's public or private. I think it will be a public closed beta test. And what I think that means is that you'll have to sign up and then get in. But whether or not that's public or private, I'm thinking it'll be public, but it might be private, or they might do an open beta. But at the minute, they keep using the term CBT, as in closed beta test, and I don't know if it's going to be public or private. Either way, that'll happen at some point. We think that's next, actually. But yeah, these weapons kind of confuse me, but they look cool, sounds cool. And then the thing that also gave me the vibe that they were pretty happy with it is it's not so much that they were happy with it. It sounds like the players were happy with it, right? Because on these these closed beta tests, or I remember when I was doing like New World Alpha, and I've done loads of tests in the past. Normally when you play these games, you play them a little bit. Well, it depends who you are. Some people actually just no life a test and try and learn everything. That is definitely not me, and I definitely think not the majority of people. I think Ashes of Creation's showing that as well, by the way. But what typically happens is that you will play the game, kind of play for maybe like an hour, get the vibe of the game and be like, yeah, I'll play that when I can play it properly. You might really like it and play it a lot, but I'd say, your average playtime is probably more like an hour. However, apparently the average playtime of the testers in this one was actually 680 minutes, which is around about 11 hours of grinding. They say grinding. I don't know if it was grinding or people are having fun, but they say 11 hours of gameplay, basically. And that's pretty crazy to me. Like, that is a lot. I mean, that's a lot. Obviously, it'll be skewed by some people doing like 20, 30, 40 hours. We don't know how long you could have actually played this test, but there'll be some people who are skewed, get a little bit addicted and just keep playing it like in an awful lot. And then there'll be some people who did actually do what I said, play like an hour and then leave. But yeah, the fact that the testers at this stage are playing a lot, for me, is kind of a good sign. Well, it's not kind of a good sign. It is a good sign. It makes me more excited than ever for Chrono Odyssey. Yeah, like, don't get me wrong. This is not like some absolute insane revelation here, but it's just another indication that this game is progressing. People are testing it, and they're hopeful that we'll actually get to see it soon. In theory, if you listen to Kakao's financials, it's supposed to be coming at the end of this year. And again, I'm just assuming, because this always happens, MMOs typically get delayed. I wouldn't be surprised if this, ends up going into next year, even if they are happy with it. But then again, summer could happen, Summer Games Fest could happen, and there might be a big trailer with a big ass release date on there, and everybody might be, hyped out of their brain. That would be nice. Kind of desperate for that MMO feeling right now. Let me know your thoughts. Are you kind of excited, interested about the PvE content, this bounty hunter system, and, some of the other stuff, the labyrinths, the time portals, and the trial dungeons? They all sound very good to me. How do you feel about the weapons? How do you think the weapons and the classes are going to work? That's the big question right now. In fact, I'll probably do another video on that soon. TM. For now, have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.